At noon on January 22, 1879, the British Empire believed itself unstoppable. By sunset, more than 1,300 British soldiers were dead. Their camp was destroyed, their artillery was captured, and an army armed mostly with spears had achieved one of the most devastating victories in military history. This was not a heroic last stand. This was a total annihilation. This was the Battle of Isandlwana. When people think of the Anglo-Zulu War, they usually remember Rorke's Drift, a desperate defense, a dramatic story immortalized in film. But just hours before that famous battle, something far more important happened. At Isandlwana, the British Army did not defend, it collapsed. And to understand how this happened, we must start with why the war began at all. By the late 19th century, Britain dominated southern Africa, but one powerful state remained independent and defiant: the Zulu Kingdom. Forged under the legendary King Shaka, the Zulu military system was feared across the region. Every adult male belonged to a regiment. Discipline was strict, loyalty was absolute, and the army existed not as a temporary force, but as a permanent institution. To British officials, this was a threat. In December 1878, the British High Commissioner, Sir Henry Bartle Frere, issued an ultimatum to King Cetshwayo of the Zulu nation. He demanded the disbandment of the Zulu army, acceptance of British authority, and the surrender of Zulu independence. Cetshwayo refused. Britain did not wait for approval from London. On January 11, 1879, British columns crossed the Buffalo River into Zululand. The Anglo-Zulu War had begun. British commanders expected a short campaign. They believed the Zulus would avoid pitched battle and dissolve under modern firepower. They were wrong. The invasion force was divided into 3 columns. The central column, commanded by Lord Chelmsford himself, advanced directly toward the Zulu heartland. Unbeknownst to him, more than 20,000 Zulu warriors were already nearby, hidden, silent, waiting. On January 20th, the central column camped beneath a strange, isolated hill called Isandlwana. The mountain resembled a clenched fist rising from the plain. The camp appeared secure. It was not. The Zulu army was commanded by 2 experienced leaders, Nchingwayo Kamahole and Mavumengwana Kandlela Ntuli. Their warriors were organized into regiments called Amabuto, each trained for coordinated movement and battle. Their doctrine was simple, elegant, and lethal. It was known as the Horns of the Buffalo. The center, or chest, would engage and pin the enemy in place. The horns would sweep around both flanks, and the loins, held in reserve, would strike where resistance weakened. This tactic had destroyed enemies for generations. Now it would be tested against the British Empire. On the morning of January 22nd, Chelmsford received reports of Zulu activity to the east of the camp. Believing he had located the enemy, he made the decision that would seal his army's fate. He split his force. Taking roughly half his troops, Chelmsford marched out to pursue what he believed was the main Zulu army. He left behind around 1,800 men to guard the camp. Command of the camp fell to Colonel Henry Pillane, an administrator with no experience commanding troops in battle. The camp had no defensive wagon laager, no trenches, no fortified perimeter. British doctrine assumed no African army would dare attack a well-armed camp in Blair daylight. The Zulus were already moving. Late that morning, a mounted British patrol crested a ridge north of the camp. Below them, in the shallow valley of the Ngwebeni Gorge, the ground seemed to come alive. Thousands of Zulu warriors rose to their feet, then tens of thousands. The patrol fled back to camp with the warning. The Zulu commanders had not intended to attack yet. They had planned to wait, to strike under better conditions, but now they had been discovered. There was only one choice: advance. At around midday, the Zulu army surged forward. British infantry deployed into a long firing line, stretching dangerously far from the camp itself. Martini Henry rifles cracked across the plain, tearing into the Zulu chest. At first, the fire was devastating. Warriors fell by the hundreds. The Zulu advance slowed, but it did not stop. While the chest absorbed the fire, the horns were already moving. Hidden by folds in the terrain, Zulu regiments raced around the British flanks. The British firing line was too thin, too extended, and it was burning through ammunition at an alarming rate. Soon, soldiers began shouting for more rounds. The system failed. Ammunition boxes were screwed shut. Tools were scarce. Runners struggled to carry supplies forward across open ground. Officers lost control of distribution. Fire slackened. The Zulus noticed immediately. With chilling discipline, they surged forward again. This time, they did not stop. The right horn smashed into the British flank. The left horn cut off retreat toward the Buffalo River. The firing line collapsed. Hand-to-hand combat erupted across the camp. Zulu warriors poured between the tents. British units made desperate last stands around their regimental colors. Artillery crews were overwhelmed. 2 British guns were captured. Within 2 hours, the battle was over. The camp at Isandlwana had ceased to exist. A handful of survivors attempted to escape. They fled toward the Buffalo River, pursued relentlessly. Many drowned while trying to cross. Others were cut down as they climbed the far bank. Of the European soldiers present, only around 60 escaped. More than 1,300 British and colonial troops lay dead. The Zulu victory had come at terrible cost, thousands killed or wounded, but the battlefield belonged to them. That evening, Lord Chelmsford returned to Isandlwana. He found silence. Bodies scattered across the plain, the camp destroyed, the regimental colors trampled into the dust. He understood instantly. The unthinkable had happened. News of Isandlwana stunned Britain. Parliament demanded answers. Reinforcements poured into South Africa. British tactics changed overnight. Camps were fortified, columns stayed concentrated, firepower was used defensively. The Zulus would eventually lose the war. At Ulundi, British firepower would shatter their army. King Chetshwayo would be captured and the Zulu kingdom would be broken apart. But Isandlwana could never be erased. It proved that technology alone does not win wars, that discipline, leadership, and strategy can overcome even the mightiest empire. Isandlwana was not just a battle. It was a warning, a reminder that arrogance kills armies. So the question remains, was the Battle of Isandlwana an unavoidable tragedy of empire, or a disaster that could have been prevented by a single different decision? Let us know what you think. Like and subscribe for more.